First, let SSH to the production host using a program called PuTTY. Identify the host name on the Linux production host. Next, connect to a Windows server using remote desktop. This server will be installed as a Sympana Commvault. Let's identify the host name of the Windows server. Next, identify the IP address of the Windows server. Please do take note that the Windows server has two separate networks. One is connected to management network and the other one is connected to storage network. Once we have identified the IP addresses and host name for both Windows and Linux hosts, we are going to add the information into hosts file as DNS server are not provided. Now let's look into the Linux host. We need to add the Windows server host name into the Linux host file. We are using vEditor to edit etc hosts file. Let's repeat this process on the Windows Server host and add Linux host. Open Notepad to the host file inside C drive Windows, Systems 32, drivers, etc. In order to install the Commvault Sympana, open the DVD-ROM using File Explorer. Run Setup All, exe. Click on I accept the terms in the license agreement. Select Standard Installation. Choose Create a new COM cell. Select Additional Package to install and choose Media Agent. We are going to install ComServe and Media Agent on this server. Choose the default path for the installation. If you see the following error, please remove Commvault folder under Program Files directory. This problem will appear if you have performed uninstall Commvault on this server. Choose Default Installation Path. Continue to create a new database. Assign admin password. This password is required to access to the console later. Choose No for software cache. We are not going to perform remote client agent installation, therefore software cache isn't important for the lab. Uncheck Launch ComCell console. We will open the ComCell console manually later after we perform client agent installation on the Linux host. On the Linux host, locate the agent installer. The path will be available on the lab guide PDF. Perform a mount operation on the Sympana agent, as shown on the screen. Change directory to MNT. Type cvpkg add to perform the installation. Scroll down the license agreement. Type Yes to accept the agreement. Press 1 or Enter to install the agent. Type the Linux hostname or press Enter if the correct hostname appear. Type 5 to install Oracle iData Agent and afterward, press D to continue. Leave Install Agents for Restore only to No. Leave the installation directory to default path, so just press Enter. Press Enter for log directory as well. As for assign a specific group to Sympana, type Yes or if Yes appear just press Enter. Type OS install for the group name. Finally press Enter to continue. Continue the step by pressing D. Leave the default port number for CVD and press enter. Leave the default port number for EVM GRC and press enter. In the lab, we assume that firewall has been turned off, so just continue by pressing enter. Input the CommServe hostname, which is the Windows Server hostname. Press enter for the enforced per client certification authentication. Just leave the selection as cell level policy. Now open the web browser, and afterward open the device manager for the disaster storage. We are going to create a loon and map to Sympana server. This will act as the backup storage. First, identify the port of the storage which will be used as iSCSI IP address. Once we have identified the IP address, go to the Windows server and open iSCSI initiator tool. Add the IP address on the target. Next, get back to Disaster Storage Device Manager and click on Provisioning. We will start off with create a loon for backup, called it OracleBackup with 200 GB of capacity. Move on create a loon group and called it as OracleBackup and add the previously created loon into the group. We need to create host. The host is representing the Windows server. We will need to add the iSCSI initiator. Please refer to the Windows Server initiator name on the Configuration tab. Afterward, create host group and called as Sympana group. Remember to add the host that was created earlier. Finally is to create mapping view. Add the loon group and host group which were created earlier. Now switch to Windows Server and open Server Manager. Select Disk Management and rescan the disks. Once the disk is discovered, initialize it and create a new volume. We will call the new volume as Backup so that it is easier to identify. Now once the disk is prepared, we can start configure Commvault. First, let's check on the Commvault services and make sure everything is running. Open the Process Manager to verify this. Next, open the Sympana Administrative Console. Key in the admin account and password which you have set during the installation. We also need to confirm that the Linux host is ready. Let's look into the Linux host by typing Sympana list. Once everything has been verified, let's focus on the Commvault console. From the console we can verify the agent readiness for both the media agent and client agent as shown on the screen. Once we have verified everything is ready, now is to discover the Oracle instance. Next, create a disk library. This is where the backup will be stored and we are using OceanStor as the backup storage. Next, create a storage policy. Make sure we select Data Protection and Archiving. Called it as OracleBackup as the policy name. The disk library that we had created will appear. We will leave the stream and retention as default. Leave the deduplication setting as default. As for the deduplication database path, I will store it on the disk array drive. This is the same as all our backup is going to reside. Next, create a schedule policy. Called this policy as Oracle and select agent as Oracle Database. We will create a full backup, perform on Sunday midnight. We will also create an incremental backup, which will perform on every day from Monday to Saturday. Next, associate to the Linux host. Once we have create the schedule, select OLTP instance from the client computers, open the properties of OLTP, click on Storage Device. Under the command line backup, choose Oracle Backup Storage Policy. Next, under Log Backup, repeat to choose Oracle Backup Storage Policy. Once that is done, click on the OLTP sub-client called Default. Open Default Properties. Locate Storage Device tab. Choose Oracle Backup as storage policy. Finally, we are ready to perform backup. However, before we begin, let's check on the Linux host Oracle database. On the Linux host, sudo into Oracle account. Check on the Oracle listener, ensure that it is connecting to the Oracle host IP address and port is using 1521. Next, run the SQL plus command to access into the database. Ensure that database is mounted, open and archive log is enable. If archive log is not enabled, follow the following procedure to enable it. First, shut down the Oracle. Next, mount the database. Finally is to enable archive mode. Next command is to open the database. Once we are verified that database is archive mode, now we can backup it. In order to backup it for the first time, under Client Computer within OLTP, right-click Default and select Backup. Choose Full Backup. We can observe the progress from Job Controller. Once backup is complete, verify the job details. Next, let's try to restore the backup. Before we could restore the backup, return to Linux host. Run the SQL plus command. Shut down the database and afterward mount the database. Now let's perform the restoration. Under the OLTP sub-client, right-click on Default. Select Browse and Restore. Click on View Content. Click on OLTP to select Recover All Table Space and choose Recover All selected. Notice that status is now shut down instead of mounted. If the database isn't mounted, this error will appear. Once we have fixed the issue by mount the database, we can resume the restoration. Verify that the current status is mounted before perform restoration. Verify the restoration job using job details, as shown on the screen. Although it is completed, there might have files isn't recovered completely. Anyway, since the database recovery is completed, the final step is to execute database open command from SQL plus command. Finally, all the backup and restoration that have been performed can be exported using send log files. This can be achieved by right-click the top navigation, all tasks and select send log files. Select the client which is the Linux host and save it into the desktop. Lastly, verify that the file is created on the desktop.